Batchewana First Nation of Ojibways lands are located along the eastern shores of Lake Superior in the Sault Ste. Marie area. In many First Nation communities, there are stories and experiences among Indigenous people of hate and racism. Regardless if it was subtle or blatant, the darkness that is ever present from days of first contact between our ancestors and the settlers to even as recent as 2023 has remained an obstacle. Batchewana continues to hold and assert their rights and interests in their original territory just as they did prior to any treaty with the Crown.
Bonjour, Good morning, everybody. I'm Chief Dean Sayers from Batchewana First Nation. We have 4 communities in the Baoting area, or Sault Ste. Marie area. The Rankin community, the Guli Mission community, the Obadjuan community, and Baoting, Sault Ste. Marie.
My name is Theodore Teddy Surratt. My Anishinaabe name is Yellow Star Woman, and I'm from Rankin Reserve of Batchewana First Nation.
Hello, my name is Nathan Mondor. I'm Anishinaabe Soto. My family was moved out west to the plains during colonization. Hereditarily, we come from Bawating, or Whitefish Island.
Bonjour. Gijikate kwe dijnakas mangdo dem. Bajamanang donjaba Anishinaabe kwe daum. My English name is Christina Agua. I come from the Batchewana First Nations. Born and raised up there. Born in the hands of my grandmother, and lived in Batchewana until we moved to the Sioux for schooling.
My GSD name is Elder Clifford Wabus from Batchewana First Nation.
My name is Hannah Sewell. My background is I'm an Anishinaabe woman from Batchewana First Nation, and I'm a nurse.
What comes to mind when you hear the words hate or racism?
Oh, I think about my childhood, and I think about the way we were just generally treated almost systemically. The Native kids had these certain ways that they were dealt with in the schools. We all got chocolate milk. We all had our times in the yard in certain areas, or we had our own teams. We called it, one of our teams was called the Batchewana Blazes, and we used to play against the Sioux Stars. It was the name newspaper. It was just us amongst kids. There was already this differentiation between the mainstream kids in the Sioux and all the Native kids that would come to go to school here. And we didn't think anything of it. We just all hung out together. But that's where we came from. We came from a community. We came from a collective, and that was how we functioned in our village. So we all kind of hung out, but it wasn't because we were like better than any other race. It was because we are a social group of people. We hang together. Everything in our community is collective. So that's the way we moved. And it was, sometimes I think that's misconstrued as like behaviors around racism, but it's actually us protecting who we are as a collective that have our own perspective, our own responsibilities, our own obligations, and we never had an individualized type of a community. Everything was collective.
I grew up in Sault Ste. Marie, so I think of like small towns and rural areas, but that racism can be present in any area that you go to. Like I've also lived in Toronto as well, so something that I also think about is like systemic racism and how, and an institutional racism, and how people who are racialized, Black people of color, can also face racism, intolerance, and discrimination in places where you don't think it would be prevalent. So like in not-for-profits, community organizations, service provision agencies, or institutions and schools.
I feel sad, angry as well, and just a sense of like deep remorse and loss, whether I'm feeling it like it's directed to me or I'm seeing it towards another person. I find that it's very misplaced and very alien, as if it shouldn't be there. It just feels innately wrong.
I traveled and apprenticed under a grandmother for several years. Did a lot of fasting ceremonies and rain dancing and those kinds of things, ceremonies. And one of the things is she did a presentation, and she would talk to the people about the 7 grandfather teachings. And the first teaching that she would talk about is the teaching of love. And she also talked about the opposite of those teachings, right? Those 7 grandfathers. And she said the opposite of love is actually fear. And, you know, I understood what she was talking about because, like I said, hate is a very powerful word, and I think that a lot of people don't understand that they're carrying that fear and how to really address it.
I get mad. That's a strong word, hate and racism. That's been around for generations, hate and racism against our First Nation people, you know. It makes me mad. And there's still lots of that going around. The few places I've been, you know, I do traditional work. I'm a traditional advisor. I do sacred fires, I carry a pipe, I drum, I sing. So a few places I've been around Turtle Island, and I hear that word hate from our people, people hating the Anishinaabe people, racism, you know. It shouldn't be like that. I try to teach people how to get along. Hate don't belong in our circles. Racism don't belong in our fires, you know.
When I hear hate and racism, I truly think of like systemic racism in Canada, lots of unconscious bias, and I think of people that just, like, for a better word, like the lack of education or things that are like swept underneath the rug to create that standpoint of hatred and racism, because I truly don't believe anyone's born racist. And I just believe that when I hear those words, it just screams to me like lack of education.
Fear, definitely fear. It's and it comes from experience. Like when those things come up and you're talking about it, we go back to a place where we may have experienced it and not necessarily had a proper result or a fair, just result. So it's a thing. It makes me feel inequitable. I think that's the word I want to use. It makes me feel less than when I'm talking about it or experiencing it.
Well, it gets me upset because to me, I believe we're all human beings. We're a spiritual being having a human experience, and that, you know, when we look at those teachings and that first teaching being love, you know, we all want to experience that love, right? And I believe that every individual walking on the face of the earth deserves that love, you know?
Tell us about a time you've heard, seen, or experienced hate or racism.
I had an elder call me a few years ago. She lived in an apartment building in Sault Ste. Marie, and she called me all upset because people in the laundry room, someone told her to, dirty squaw, get out of this laundry room, get out of here. Similar on the city bus, people, same person, getting racial taunts, calling her names, dirty Indian, things like that. And and it really is hurtful. We look towards promotion, though. We try to make messaging available, even put it on the buses around racism. Right now, even on the city buses, you'll see it says, Bindigin, or come in, or Anin, or it's got First Nations languages on the outside of the buses now. Welcome, the French, English, and First Nations language. So we are making some progress. We're doing our best to eradicate racism, but it's still prevalent. It's still around.
How does it make you feel when you see or hear about hate or racism?
It makes me feel really uncomfortable. It makes me feel really angry. It's one thing for it to happen to me because like I'm used to it in some senses. I've seen it happen before. I've experienced it in many different places, institutions, places that I've worked. But it's really hard to see that when it happens to other folks, especially when it comes to like elders or youth. When I hear about people being targeted or being victims of racism, And places, and again, like when places where there shouldn't be that type of behavior happening towards anybody. So it's really upsetting, but I think it continues. It makes me continue having those conversations and challenging those places and those people who might still feel racist or discriminatory towards people of color and Indigenous people.
Just a lack of disrespect for personal space, cultural boundaries, and even like the sacredness of our bodies.
Oh, wow. Well, it goes back to my childhood, my family, where we grew up in Batchewana, and coming to the city, and my parents talking about how they were treated, and my mom talking about the children that died because of infested blankets brought in when there was a disease that was going on in the earlier years, in the early 30s. And also in regards to women not allowed to do certain things because of their status.
As a healthcare professional, it's very infuriating because you know that we're all there to do a good job and to service other people. So when those unconscious bias and racism really stems into play, like it ultimately impedes patients. And it's really hard to watch as a nurse sometimes. And a lot of the times you're expected to be very professional on the other end. As someone who has a little bit of melanin in their skin and who is probably on the other end of racism. So there's been lots of periods and times, but it just gets chalked up to, I feel like, lots of times, like lack of education.
How can we move forward today for the sake of our future?
Harmony and education in regards to the diversity of life and culture pre-colonization would be the best way forward, being that accepting and loving nature of humanity and balance between the Mother Earth and people.
I believe that we can all teach one another, and we're all students to one another, and help one another to be more inclusive and in understanding, you know, what life is about. You know.
Follow the TRC. Follow the TRC and do the right thing when nobody's looking, because truthfully that's what all of humans need in this world.
We really need to take a look at the obligations that Canada and Canadians have inherited from the historic relationships that we struck. And we shouldn't be living in squalor. We shouldn't be living in poverty. We shouldn't be affected with all of these social issues in our villages. There is a misinterpretation of the obligations that have been inherited by Canada, Ontario, all the provinces, all the citizens that are on our land from around the world that have come here. There is a real lack of orientation to the obligations that are represented today within Canadian society, the promises that were made to us. Everything that we are seeking today as a people are founded in legal premises, in legal documentation. But not long after we entered into these agreements with the newcomers, the agreements were violated and not fulfilled. And the leadership in Canada has been able to get away with it for hundreds of years. Now it's no longer acceptable. In the illegality of the interpretations is coming to light, and even Canada's own courts are telling Canada and Ontario, you got to stop acting this way. That's not the way Canada is legally constructed. So education needs to happen, and the systems need to evolve with regards to curriculum. And it's really from ignorance that we see a lot of the relationship challenges, like racism, like inability for Indians to own land, like recognition of tax exemptions, or recognition of the beauty of every race, every people around the world. There seems to be the essence of the doctrine of discovery still in place, terra nullius, meaning this earth has no life, there's no people here, we can take it. Like, that's so archaic, it's so beyond a real ethical perspective that Canadians believe is the foundation of their lands and their society. And when they start to delve, that they would see. And I hear and I talk to a lot of Canadians, and they want a change. They want to see a true reflection of what they expected to see from what the world believes Canada to be.
It is our hope that the stories and experiences shared here in this video can help bring understanding, awareness, and education to those who do not realize the kind of hate and racism that Indigenous people have gone through. In order to move forward and forge a new relationship between nations, we must let go of these negative views and work together.